Okay, and we're live. Looks like the sound is as good as it's going to get till I get a better microphone. Let's go ahead and share this a few places. Give everyone a minute to get here. Oh, it's not here. It starts in CMU. That's right. We'll share the CMU on the thing there. Okay. Let's see if I can go to the places that shoot. Okay. Search one every single one of them out individually. Looks like that's what we're going to do. DKMU. Hello, everybody. Hey, Max. Just getting it shared to a few places. Give me a moment. If I can figure out how to do that. Right. Okay, let's just do it in my own groups. Okay. Good enough. Okay. Hi, Felix. Good to see you here, my love. So I didn't post a lot this week about the reading. I did, of course, do the reading. I did most of it over the course of about 3 days. But I'm excited to talk about it. I'm gonna be referring to the book again every once in a while, like I did last time. We are gonna give everyone a bit more time to show up. I think I may have forgot to bring me a lighter. So I'll be right back. Okay. I'm back. Hey, Ricky. I said I'm back and somebody disappeared. That's kind of funny. Okay. Hey, Romstead. Okay, so gonna bring everyone a little bit of time to get here still. Hey, Agatha, good to see you. I'm gonna turn my voice down a little so it doesn't echo, because I know this microphone that we have right now, if I get too loud, it tends to echo. So I'm gonna try and keep my voice about this level here. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started, actually. There's enough of it here to go ahead and start. Today's book is the Liber Lux, and it starts stress management condition. Yes, the first thing that there's this talking about the being the initiates of magical order. Between chaos and ordinary matter, between Kia and the mind, there's just a realm of half-formed substance called ether. That was the first thing that I wanted to talk about, is this idea of the ether. That's kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about the overlap between the material and the astral realm, is the ether. That's a much better word for it than what I've been trying to describe. But I feel like we needed to get more onto that understanding of what the ether is. That's what it is. It's the gap between, it's essentially the veil itself. We talk about the veil being too thick or too thin because we have different ways of viewing this word. We have all these different ways of viewing the same idea. But that's what it is the ether. And essentially, there is a ether deficit. There's an ether deficit on this reality. I want to read a little bit more about what he said here. In the etheric realm of nascent possibility, only what we can sensibly call casual, probable, or normal events usually come into existence. Yet as centers of Kia or chaos ourselves, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, we can sometimes call very unlikely coincidences or unexpected events into existence by manipulating the ether. Such as magic. Even the physical sciences have begun to blunder into the etheric with their discoveries of quantum intermediacy and virtual processes on the subatomic matter. Subatomic matter, yes. That's what I'm talking about with this weaving. I know I'm supposed to be as noob as possible in this, but I feel like it's important to talk about the differences here between the stuff that it says in my book, the sorcerer's shadow, and what is being said here, because it's different words for describing the same thing. I call it weaving patterns in the astral realm before they manifest onto the material plane. I've talked about it before with sigils, how we create a form on the astral. We create an intent, we give that intent form, and then we charge it so that it affects the way that the ether is woven as we go from the energetic to the material. This is how a moment manifests, is with these manipulations of the ethereal that they talk about here. But I feel it's easier to understand as the idea of weaving patterns within the pattern, weaving knots, if you will, within the threads of the pattern. I feel like there's a little more to get to there. This is the part I actually went on a big rant about this to Felix earlier this week, and they suggested that I should post it all on Facebook. And then when I went to do it, well, the words had already escaped. But there's an important bit there. It doesn't matter how you do it. Yeah, it doesn't matter what kind of intent and form. I mean, it can, the more we sync up with things. But in the end, it is that is happening. The tools, all the different things that we use to create, they're just metaphors for this weaving. They're just a metaphor, a way for our mind to understand what is happening on the etheric level. And that's essentially the same thing that he is saying in different words. Now, the Kia talks about that quite a bit here. And I'm sure he means it to pronounce key or something, but all I can see. Oh, it's the second book in the Liber. The Liber, which, oh, I didn't put a link to the PDF. Let's get that up while we're here. But it is the Liber by Peter J. Carroll. And we are on the second Liber in the Liber. It's divided into several Libers. Let's see. Should be it. Okay. So I can't actually put a link to the PDF here, but I can put a link. Just a second. But I can put a link to where I have a link to the PDF on CMU, which is a public group, so you won't even need to join the group to be able to access it. Though, of course, you're welcome to join the group. Let me just make sure that works. It's taking us where it's supposed to. Yes. Okay. That link will take you to a link that has a copy of the PDF. If you want to read along, it's really rather short. The Liber Lux is from page 27, I believe 55. Okay, yeah. Yeah, we're just talking about the Liber Lux today. And then next time we'll talk about Liber Nox. Okay, so the Liber Lux, it covers a lot of important material. It's got this star in the front talking about how we each are attached to these different things. And the Ayugitas, if I remember correctly, is the higher self. We'll get to that. Kia cannot be experienced directly because it is the basis of consciousness or experience. It has no fixed qualities which the mind can latch onto. Kia is the consciousness, is the elusive I, which confers self-awareness but does not seem to consist of anything. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the I. It is the I who moves. It is perception. I don't think it's necessary to give it a strange sounding word when there's a beautiful little word game there with I/I, because they mean the same thing in this context. That I is perception. So I prefer that to call that the eye of the storm, but that's what they're talking about there, is the actual perception. And that actually is the thing that is why we are all equal, is because we are all the center of perception. He's going to kind of get into that in this, but he doesn't quite put that together. Okay, gnosis. Let's see, is there anything else I want to talk about in that first paper? Are there any questions about any of this, about the Kia? Anything anyone else wants to comment about the first little bit here, being the initiate 3-degree syllabus? Talks about duality. I know a lot of people are trying to get beyond duality, thinking and non-duality thinking, but that's actually, I mean, we can think beyond dualities, unlike what it says here, but there is always that conflict. There is always death posture. Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. This does talk about death posture. Starts within the gnosis. Yeah, exactly, Felix. I hear the Kia or Kia. It's probably more what it's supposed to be, and it sounds like energy, and even kind of describes it like it's energy here, but it's not. It's the perception of energy. It is that part of you through which all things move. It is the part of you that is subjective. It is the I. And this ki thing, yeah, it makes it sound like energy. I remember thinking at first, I'm like, what is this? And made me tend to associate it with the idea of the energy flow in Tai Chi. Exercising energy. Yes, exactly. But it's not really the will. See, that's where that word that they're using is even creating a bit of a misunderstanding, because the eye of the storm is not where the will, it may be where the will stems from in some way, but it is not the will. It is simply the perception. This is the part where he talks about leaving behind. Everything outside of this is what should be there. Exactly. It is the consciousness. It is not the will or the energy that is created by the I existing. It is the I, not the storm. If that made any sense. So, I mean, we could, in a lot of ways, I could spend all day on that. I've worked a lot with this idea of understanding what is the I, but that's what it boils down to. It is that which perceives. I think, therefore I am. The thought tour, thoughts that observe. Unrelated to Liber, no Liber Lux, I made the unfortunate mistake of sharing the cast house sigil with a non-witch in an attempt to help them, who a day later was lying overtly about it too. Yeah, that's the people can be crazy. You never know what people are gonna do. Um, that's not gonna cause any damage to the sigil itself. I do have that's exactly why it has this Horus as its steward, is because people thinking and interacting with the sigil in un in unprescribed ways and unforeseen ways can cause problems with it. Yeah, it is definitely not demonic. There is um, some necromancy involved with it because of Horus. He is a cause spirit that is connected to the sigil and is its steward. And what he does is keep everything on track. People trying to mess with the sigil, people adding stuff to the sigil, people, I'm sure at least with how my behavior online, I'm sure at least one person has tried to curse me through the cash cow sigil by this point. So Boris is there as a steward to keep everything on track and keep all of that working properly. I don't actually maintain Boris myself at this point. That's actually another member of the Sorcerers Guild and my different groups, because I couldn't take him to Canada. He was forbidden entry at the border for being a dead cow. But he's most certainly not a demon. He is a dead cow, a dead bull named Boris. Hail Boris. Anyways, second thoughts, as Terry Pratchett would say. Indeed, it is that which is subjective but also objective. It is that which perceives. We're going to go ahead and get past that at this point. Back to gnosis. And the next thing, he talks quite a bit about gnosis and the different types of gnosis that we're achieving. And this is where he really gets into the idea again of leaving the self behind. Well, or pushing the self into extremes. For me, gnosis, I mean, he had a lot to say here, but frankly, I had a hard time sticking with it. I want to look over it a bit because I disagree on a lot of it. He talks about using fear and anger to paralyze the senses, and these things do work. What gnosis is essentially is convincing yourself for a moment that what you are doing is magic. See, that what you are doing is magic, that you have stepped into the magical realm. And as he says in it, the deeper a gnosis is, the more powerful that moment can be. But gnosis can be just as small as simply what I talk about in my Sorcerer Shadow Volume 1 with charging the vortex. Gnosis can be as simple as allowing yourself to become magical. And we do this in there with the charging process by drawing the energy up into the self through the heart chakra is how I describe it, and then down through the arms and creating a vortex about itself. This, yeah, the artwork is pretty cool. This is actually, in a way, that's kind of what I'm talking about, because we allow the vortex, even as we're pushing the energy out, I talk about allowing the vortex to open up around you. This is getting yourself into that state. And just that little bit of visualization can be gnosis. But the more we convince ourselves, the more we drive into that moment, the deeper the magic becomes, essentially. And he talks about using different types of ecstatic states. Well, and I want to get to ecstatic states before we get into the opposite. That's the two things he talked about: is ecstatic states, or what is the term he uses? Let's see. There are two methods of just ignore experience. As a great master once observed, there are two methods of becoming God: the upright or the averse. Let the mind become as a flame or a pool of still water. Okay, so we're going to talk about the flame ones first. This, even though it is in many ways not the first one I achieved, this is in some ways, for me, the easier ones. Yes, inhibiting states. Yes, we are either in an excitatory state or an inhibitory state. That is more the words that I would use. So, the ecstatic states, then, one can get into those very easily, especially for those of us that are neurotypical. Actually, neurotypical. I am not neurotypical. Those of us that stim, those of us that are neurodivergent, stimming is a way to get that excitatory process going on. You know, the flapping of the arms, rubbing of the hands. With me, it's mostly noise. I like the. I can go all wild. But this stimming, that's exactly what it is if you allow yourself to go into it, allow yourself to just stim out, spaz out. This is an excitatory state. You can stim out to the intent, to the symbol that you've decided to charge. And you can reach very ecstatic states with this. Excitatory joy is the most pleasant. Sexual gnosis, of course, is quite pleasant as well, but you can literally just stim and allow that groove of it to carry you away. I mean, I realize if you don't have autism or ADHD or anything else that causes you to stim, it's not as easy. This is one of them things where, again, in magic, those of us that have irregular brains are more suited for this. We can enter these excitatory states more easily. But anyone can. You just got to work yourself up. He talks about anger. Anger is dangerous. Yeah. To get yourself into a true frenzy state, you need to learn how to control it first. Because if not, once you've gotten to that point that you are simply perceiving and you're blasted out in rage, this is how we get into berserker states. That's what frenzy gnosis is a berserker type state. Well, rage gnosis. Frenzy gnosis can take on any of these forms, especially the stimming. And really, it's as easy as that. But if we work at it from anger or fear, I think these are unwise ways to go about it unless you are prepared. You've never heard the term stimming before? Well, it's like, you know how you do the little fidgets? You know, whatever your fidgets are. Because if you've got ADD, or ADHD, you've got little things your hands want to do. That's where we start with that. That's what stimming is. Stimming is mostly associated with autism. I have both. I have ADHD and autism, according to I don't know, neurodivergent as heck, whatever that means. Oh, tonight's drink is the alcohol. Tullamore Dew whiskey and rainwater. I'm gonna take that a little easy on that tonight. The smoker's choice is super lemon haze. It's very nice. Okay, so the frenzy gnosis. Outside of stimming, we can work ourselves up. You know, it's easy to work yourself up. Get something that you're focused on. Get yourself all excited. Pace. Pacing is a very fast way to work yourself up. Walk in a tight circle, focusing on the thing that you are focused on, the intent that you want, the thing that you need, the want, the desire that is in you. And just, spaz out. Allow your spaz to come out. Often, especially those of us with ADHD, when we were younger, somebody you'd have to like jump around and literally spaz out. That's what we're looking for. That just going with it. But if you are neurotypical, try the pacing, try the focusing in on the thing and obsessing over it. Just get your mind to get kind of circular around the idea. Indeed. So at that point, once you're in that, you want to focus on your idea, your intent, and charge the sigil. And often you want to push yourself to the point of about cracking, essentially what they're after here. And that is what he's talking about with the excitatory. I keep forgetting what he called it. I don't like what he called it. Either way, that's how you get into your excitatory states, your ecstatic trances. I prefer to do it with joy and just stimming. Okay, and now the other one, inhibitory. Talks a lot about the death posture. A very fast and simple method contains a blocking the ears, nose, and mouth, covering the eyes with the hands and breath. Forcefully jam back near unconsciousness and voluntarily fix the posture. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that idea. The death posture that I know is lay back, arms crossed like this, and your feet crossed at the ankles, and simply allow yourself to fade. I will usually have my dream staff between my arms and down towards my feet, and simply imagine oneself in a cairn, imagining oneself dying and drifting. And I've always found that very effective. As much as I like the excitatory, I think in the end, truly, I learned the inhibitory, at least consciously first, because I learned how to meditate when I was quite young. But all we're really looking for here is the loss of self. And when we talk about allowing the mind to blank, that is the key word, allowing. Allow your mind to go blank. Don't blank your mind. That's never going to work. Your mind doesn't work that way. Having ADHD, this is again one where we actually have a hack. Because this is spacing out. That you just totally walk into a room and forget why you were in the room and like nothing, your head just emptied. That's it. That's the groove. That's the move we're looking for. But you can't force it. You have to allow it. Which also means when you have thoughts in your mind, don't force them out. Allow them to flow and simply don't heed them. Ignore your thoughts. Your mind is going to keep doing stuff for a while, even after you've relinquished control of it. Just let it. Just let it do its thing. Don't concern yourself with it. Don't concern yourself with thousands of thoughts bouncing around in your head. Let them bounce. Let them be. Let them have their space. They have no concerns. Yeah. That is how we achieve the inhibitory state. And even then, with this, we still want to keep that idea of the momentum of our intention with us. And it talks about sensory deprivation and all these different drugs that you can take to achieve gnosis. I'm not saying these things don't work. Gnosis, though, in the end, is really just as simple as believing in magic. As we progress, as we learn to create ourselves and become the sorcerer that we wish to be, we should essentially be aiming for a state where we are always in a form of gnosis. We are trying to grow in knowledge and belief in the supernatural. We are trying to expand our gnosis, our knowledge. We want to constantly be going towards gnosis. We don't always want to be in an ecstatic trance state, but the word gnosis is connected to knowledge. We want to expand our knowledge. We want to become more convinced that magic is real, because we have to have that belief in order to create a magical system and have things work. It goes from beyond belief to understanding that magic works. And a lot of what he's talking about here requires the nullification of the psychic sensor. But ideally, what we want to do is rewrite the brain's program, because the psychic sensor only exists if your brain's narrative And you're always getting some from the outside world, the things around you. There's always people that are going to doubt magic exists. You're going to hear about magical thinking in a negative context and all over the place. Even some of the philosophers that are quite good at what they do still don't quite understand magical thinking. So you're going to hear it. There's always going to be some of that. But we want to rewrite our brain's narrative so that it is not censoring psychic things, and your mind simply accepts that that is part of reality, and that is part of the preset of how reality presents itself. So we want to continue expanding in gnosis. Gnosis is something we achieve, but it is not something we ever want to fully leave. We don't want to spend our entire time up on the mountain. We want to be able to interact with the daily reality. We can't be in a frenzy at all times. But the knowledge and understanding, the base level of convincing oneself magic is real, should be with us at all times as we progress. Okay, let's take a look at this a little more. It does talk about going on a walk with a sigil focused in your mind. That is that's classic spare there, and this can be extremely effective. Indeed, noticing the omens and sometimes. Noticing omens and synchronicity is a good way to interact with daily reality. Indeed, yeah, I very much think so. Not all omens are ominous. We have small omens throughout the day that synchronicity will show us how things line up, and learning to observe these patterns as they move is absolutely a great way to help start convincing your daily mind that magic is real, to stop filtering out these things that don't make sense. And we each have a different level of that from the beginning. Like some of us were born into magical traditions, or were at least born being told they had to create or somehow instinctually know a magical tradition. However, getting a little specific to my own problems there, but it's a different level of psychic sensor. There are people born in other parts of the world outside of the United States, like some of these like in the Caribbean and places like that, or on the reservations, where it's just an accepted fact of life. There's lots of places in the world where this psychic sensor isn't a thing because people just accept that that's how things are. That's only in this Western world that rational mind, supposedly none of this stuff is real. But at the same time, that psychic sensor works in the opposite way too, because people believe things and have them happen whether they want to or not. They have to acknowledge, even in that world, that faith healing is a thing. As much as they say, "Oh, faith healing is bullshit," faith healing is real. They have to take the account the placebo effect every single health study they do, because they have learned that the ritual of medication, theater of hospitals, taking pills, will convince people that they are getting better. Even if you give them a sugar pill, if you tell them it's going to heal them, it freaking might. And so they know it's real, but it doesn't fit their narrative. They are actually essentially a conscious version of the psychic sensor. We're going to push this out of the way. We're going to account for it so it doesn't change things, but we're going to pretend it's not there, and we're going to do our best to make it so it doesn't affect it. Which to me is asinine. seems like if you've discovered that that is a possibility and that the theater of science helps people heal, well, why wouldn't you lean into that? Figure out how to best present the pill in a way that, I mean, yeah, still give them the right pill, but present it in a way that is going to be the most convincing to them that it's going to work. And I mean, it's amazing how far that can go. The psychosomatic restoration. I have a condition with my feet called pustular psoriasis, and it's mostly that my feet will get upset if they're touched by a chemical. They get upset, they're pump white blood cells all down to my feet, freak out, got this autoimmune thing. It's very unpleasant. And then if it starts, if I catch it early enough, I have these steroids I'm supposed to put on my feet. But if I catch it early enough, I just have to show them the bottle. I just get the bottle out, wave it around my feet, never even actually open it, maybe crack the lid if I'm real worried about it. But don't even have to actually use the stuff. Just have to remind my body it exists. And doing the theater of that convinces my feet and that part of my mind that is with that things have been taken care of, it's okay. I can close the bottle, don't have to actually use the steroid, let's put it back on the shelf. And it works. Do you think that would happen if someone told you your feet had touched them? If I believed them, probably. There are a few times where I've been so convinced, I'm just pretty sure something happened, and I had a reaction. And other times where I've had similar things happen, like, oh, it's okay, just calm down, don't worry about it, and I seem to have less reaction. So it is very psychosomatic. But it could be also because of the type of condition it is, because that's what happens is my body freaks out, rushes the white blood cells down there to deal with whatever they think it thinks is going on. But while we're off subject, we've pretty much gotten off subject at this point. There's a nocebo effect too, which actually you just brought up. Do you think it would happen if someone told you to feed and touch it? Yes, possibly. This is a nocebo effect. Whereby you can convince someone that they're sick, they will get sick. This is why they shouldn't be putting such graphic, horrible warning labels on cigarettes and stuff. Probably why more people are getting lung cancer than used to, because you're told, oh, if you're smoking cigarettes, you're going to get lung cancer. That can actually increase the amount of people that are harmed by the cigarette smoke. But this nocebo effect, that's a big part of how curse works. This is the very reason why, personally, if I had decided to curse somebody, I wanted to know they'd be cursed. I wanted to know how. I wanted to know why. And I wanted to know who did. Because these are all factors in making it actually work. Yeah, listing off all the side effects constantly. I mean, it is fair to let someone know what the side effects of a drug are, but to list them off, make sure they hear them constantly, yeah, this is going to increase the odds of your body deciding that it's going to have that reaction. There is a huge part of psychology that is involved in physical health. And it's asinine we don't take this more into account. It's asinine that modern health system doesn't take mental wellness into the thing, even though they admit that a positive attitude is one of the most important things to surviving a disease. So getting through chemotherapy or any of that stuff. But then they don't bother making a focus on it. They put psychology and surgery in completely different fields when we all know that one affects the other. And that gets back to what we were talking about in the book here, about the etheric affecting the physical. But in this case, we're even getting all the way up to the mental affecting the etherical, which then affects the physical. because that's one of the things that we often tend to forget is there's three, not two. It's not just the astral and the physical planes. There's also the mental plane, and that's part of that etheric too, because it is actually the gap between all three. As much as I just talked about them being three different things, and it's one, the mental goes into the astral and the physical, they're more like a triangle than layers on a ribbon or a lasagna. Another triangle, we're supposed to be in the center with a proper balance of all three. Well, we're not. Our primary focus is on a particular aspect of the mental plane, just off of the material. We're focused, well, on stuff like this psychic sensor, we're focused on an untrue narrative that we have been being directed to over and over again through time, through lifetime after lifetime. And these things these things push us to the world being boring and pessimism, and they push us towards pessimism, to the idea that everything needs to be the same, towards conformity. And we're finally breaking out of that. We're finally breaking out. As much as it might not seem like it at the moment, there is a lot of death throes going on with the gray face community. Anyways, I feel like we got past gnosis. If there's any questions that anyone has on any of that, any extra comments they want to make. Gray face community. Yeah, okay. That was I should have known that I was gonna immediately get some questions. What I mean by the gray face community is, well, the Christians, the fascists, anyone that takes themselves too seriously and walk around with gray faces. Is this essentially what gray face means? Is those that take life too seriously, those that want to control others. It's just the Discordian term for being too serious, for being one of the people that resist joy, want things to be unhappy, take the color out of life. And that is essentially what was going on before things started getting put back on a better course, because they wanted everyone in this OTO. I have nothing against the OTO. I myself didn't. It's not my thing. They suppose they do take themselves a bit seriously at times. I felt like their Gnostic Mass was essentially a play put on without an audience. But each to each their own with their ritual. If that's what it takes for them to feel the groove of how they move their magic, then it's on them. Not my thing. But yeah, they were trying to make this reality uninteresting so the audience would stop paying attention to the bits of themselves that existed in this reality. I know that's in Liber Lux, but may have been further in. Thought that part was kind of fun. Which part? Yes, they do have quite a bit of seriousness and other rules. Like I said, I've been invited to a Gnostic mass. I like the people that invited me. I have nothing against them. It is not my thing, but I'm not big into what they call high magic. This ceremonial magic is not my thing. Yeah, we must have missed. It must have got censored or something. I didn't see it. Huh? You got censored a little there, I guess. Sorry about that. YouTube is weird. I don't know what it's going to censor, especially now that they got the AI watching. But you say, well, I don't know how much they really watch these lives. Anyways, unless there's more to say about gnosis, I think we should go ahead and go on to evocation. There is a lot here he said that I found odd. Evocation may be further defined as a summoning or creation of such partial beings to accomplish some purpose. They may be used to cause change in oneself, change in others, or change in the universe. The advantage of using a semi-independent being rather than trying to effect a transformation directly by will are several. The entity will continue to fulfill its function independently of the magician until its life force dissipates. Being semi-sentient, it can adapt itself to a task in a way that a non-conscious simple spell cannot. During moments of the possession by certain entities, the magician may be the recipient of inspiration abilities and knowledge not normally accessible to him. I'm not sure where he's talking about possession because that should be something that's an invocation, which we'll get to next. But evocation. I'm gonna go to read a little bit more here. We're not monetized, so I'm gonna read quite a bit. Really. Evocation. Well, the lives aren't monetized. Evocation is the art of dealing with magical beings or entities by various acts to create their contact and allow one to conjure and command them with acts and exorcism. These beings have a legion of names from demonology of many cultures, elementals, familiars, incubi, succubi, unro. Yeah, there was a lot in that. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 5 pages. And I don't know. I left me a little speechless. Hey, Kira, glad you made it. Oh, invoking a war god. Yeah, we're gonna get. Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. It wasn't a gnosis. It was an example of evoking a war god. Yeah. All right. So evocation. I I mean, he's got a lot of the basic parts here, but I feel like he hasn't spent a lot of time actually working with spirits outside of created beings. And he talks some about creating the proper atmosphere, but that's a big part of the evocation. If you really want to get somewhere, is creating the right vibe, the right energy, the right context for the creation to conjure into. 'Cause, yeah, he also, like, he says a lot, but doesn't really say much. Um, the process of, in all cases, establishing a relationship with the spirit follows a similar process as evocation. Firstly, the attributes of the entity, its type, scope, name, appearance, and characteristics must be placed in the mind or made known to the mind. Now, absolutely. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about evocation because I'm supposed to be being a noob here. But I remember the first time reading this and feeling completely unsatisfied by what he had to say here, especially his belief in what incubi and succubi are is just pretty off. So yeah, we're just going to talk about evocation. Evocation is calling up a spirit outside of the self. I don't feel that creating a being is quite falls under quite the same category as evocation. That is still spell casting. Unless you are like making a shell for another spirit to then occupy as its form in this reality. Servitor magic. Yes. Yes, servitor magic. Um, that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't feel that created beings is the same as evocation unless you're evoking someone else's totem, which there are things where that works. That's the case. Like the 46, like the 40 servants deck that oh my gosh, I can't remember his last name all of a sudden. But anyways, the 40 servants deck that Tommy, whatever his last name is, made, using those, that's evocation. But anyways, in order for evocation to work, you need to have established a connection with the spirit. It has to have some desire on its end to come to you. Like I said, you want to create the right vibe, the right atmosphere. You want to understand the spirit as much as you can beforehand and establish a rapport with the spirit, establish some sort of connection and understanding. And by doing that, you increase the odds because the spirit has to be willing to come to you in the first place. And I'm going to assume we're talking about spirits of an astral nature. And actually, Max, I noticed you brought this up on one of your shorts the other day. Spirits of an astral nature do not have material forms. So when we're talking about creating a manifestation, even in this case, a full-on manifestation, you're not going to see a physical being. You're going to see its energy. You're going to see its energy taking a shape and form. And this is what we're ultimately aiming for. I was also deeply disappointed by others' thoughts of incubi and succubi, calling them stupid and predatory. Yes, exactly. There's I'm finding a lot of the Western mindset extremely well. It informs the entire context of this book in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I didn't see it as much the first time, so that tells me that I am escaping that mindset more because I didn't see it last time. But now coming back through it this time, I see it. I knew that there was errors, but I didn't see where those errors were coming from. So I suppose I am behaving as I did as a new to this book because it's one of the first books on cast magic I ever read because I had the same reaction then. Yes, well, it's also Western occultism thinking really seems all about the ego when it says it's not. Indeed, it's very egocentric, it's very human centric, and it's still trying to grasp onto that rational mind in a way that keeps that psychic sensor in place. This is one of the things where essentially I was talking about expanding or growing our gnosis as we evolve as a sorcerer, and clinging to some of the ideas with Western civilization is just going to keep reinforcing that psychic sensor. These are things we want to learn to leave behind. Oh, yes, Matt. You're welcome. I enjoy your shorts quite a bit. I'm pretty sure I put a like on it. I meant to comment, but I got a bit distracted. I'm usually doing stuff while I'm looking at my phone, especially if I'm watching shorts. But yeah, the demons, astral beings. This is why they value some of the things they do value when we get into invocations, because they don't have physical bodies of their own. They don't have a way to experience certain things. A lot of times when we are, and that's another thing with this idea of offerings, like, okay, well, that's why you got to develop a rapport. Well, they do, Max. I enjoy being one of your subscribers. Yeah, we want to create a rapport with the spirits. You want to create an understanding of them, not only so that you know what kind of context they actually want, but so that they have a reason to come, a reason to humor you with your offerings of things they can consume. Now, there are things that have etherical forms, and they have a greater ability to consume. But these spiritual beings, they can enjoy incense, they can enjoy sound. When you're offering them alcohol and things like that, unless you're providing a way for them to experience that, it's more the theater of it. It's more the idea of it. Even then, like if you say it is for them, that does give them some experience of it. But it's like just an edge. It's just like flavored water, you know, one of them seltzer waters, like a White Claw or something. Flavor there, but that's why that's why a lot of the spirits like to work with invocation, or they have other things they want from you once you get. What do you think of offering your own sensation as part of the offering? Once you start offering your own sensation, you get into the realm of invocation. Yes, I agree with you're saying there, Kira. If belief in something gives it power, if one does not believe in the idea of a psychic sensor, it might not be there. To some extent, but there is still that factor of, while you're believing things that limit the idea of magic, that's how the psychic sensor is created. So giving it a name helps us resist it. What do you think of offering your own sensations part of the offering? Like I said, that we start verging on invocation there. Once we start allowing them to use our form, our physical body, to experience that requires them entering into us to some extent. So, evocation, finding the spirit's sigil is often something that is going to be helpful, But I find it's best to go to them first. I keep talking about this idea of establishing rapport. If you really want to get a spirit's attention, you send it essentially a note, a letter of introduction, which is you do a spell stating your desire to contact the spirit and what you want it for. You offer some singing, incense, something of that nature, something that they can enjoy on an aesthetic level. Giving them actual energy helps as well. You can offer such beings sex energy. But just because a being enjoys sex energy and is able to use it doesn't mean it's a succubus or incubus. A lot of your spiritual beings can consume many different types of energy. And even those that are primarily using feeding on sexual things does not necessarily make them predatory, stupid, or anything like that. I think he even said that all incubi and succubi are created beings of some sort. If I remember correctly. Incubi and succubi are pre-existing entities created by other people's pathological sexuality. Yeah, that's not necessarily true in and of itself. Okay, so as I was saying, for evocation, I suggest doing a ritual evoking them to a small degree, essentially sending a letter of introduction saying what you want to work with them for, and seeing how that goes, seeing if you get some access to their presence. And that you want to be using incense, as true a name as you can find, their sigil, if such a thing exists, and a private moment, place where you can do these things, intone their name, draw their sigil, light the incense, speak upon what it is that you are interested in working with them on, and you should feel something, a connection. It's just a vibe at this point. Just the idea that you're even feeling a resonance with the image, with what you have said, begins that process. Yeah. And then from there, my next step typically is to meditate on the sigil and imagining myself astral projecting up to them and introducing myself, stating who I am, what I want once again, and often there will be a response meditating onto them. It's not like you're going to wind up, boom, within the middle of their realm with this astral projection. You want to simply astral project yourself out to them. You should get a response if they're interested. And this can be done either in dream or astral projection, where you focus on their name, their sigil, and imagine creating connection. This is where you have the first conversation. Some people would consider this in and of itself evocation. But after that is when you actually do the summoning. If they have agreed to work with you and say that both of you have agreed that it's necessary for them to manifest in your reality, that's when you do the summoning with the circle, incense, and however you want to do that part, because this should actually be an agreed upon thing by you and the being you were working with. But usually you will need to create designated space. For me, that takes the place of a 8-pointed star, but as two squares over top of each other, so that it looks more like a Star of David, but with 8 points. And the part in the center is the designated space. And you will evoke the spirit from there, using a very similar to what you did with the letter of introduction with the first ritual. At least that's how I tend to go about these things. Or sometimes I will walk off into the woods, go on a journey to meet them somewhere. And that is part of the ritual, is preparing, calling them up and saying, okay, I will meet you at the park under the bench. You walk to the park under the bench, and you're not expecting to see, still not expecting to see a physical being. But this is the part that it's hard to completely, it's kind of like seeing a pattern and form appear within the things that are already there. Tommy Kelly, yes, that's who wrote the 40 Servants. Gordon White has passed. Gordon White, is Gordon White Tommy Kelly? No, I'm not entirely familiar with Gordon White, honestly. I have seen some stuff saying that he was passed, and I've been wondering who that was. Just a moment. The tip of my beard's coming in. I look all frizzy. I'll be thinking I've been drinking way more whiskeys than I have. Yeah, I would like to get a 40 servant deck. I haven't actually gotten one yet, but I hear great things about it, and I've seen some great work done with it, or at least reports of great work done with it. And I've been in some contact with a few of the 40 servants simply by other people using the deck. And it's fairly impressive. It's fairly impressive. Great deck. Like I said, unfortunately, I really don't know who Gordon White is. Okay, but like I said, when they manifest, I want to compare it to a magic eye picture. But that's not quite the thing, but it's just they actually use the shapes of things around that somehow just become a face on the wall, in the air, on a tree bark, wherever it is that, because there's something there, but it's not something you can see. So your mind will once again connect things and make you see a face in the bark, energy. It can be very different, but that's the best words I can put towards it. It creates conjuration from things that currently exist, that are already there, to somehow manifest them into a form. That's as much sense as I'm going to be able to make that make for the moment. Okay. Any other questions about evocation? Did we miss anything there? He talks a lot again about fasting and sleep deprivation. Honestly, in the end, I feel like 90% of the time, you're best off working with spirits and astral projection or dream. Sometimes the actual summoning is necessary, but that's more to bring them to a closer relation to you, for them to do the things that they need to do. Sometimes they need that firmer link. When you actually evoke something and can contact it like that, it is to develop a closer link, a firmer connection, so that they can have a larger influence over your reality to be able to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. So often the evocation is necessary for their work. Okay, invocation. Let's see, I want to read this part here. The ultimate invocation, that of Kia, cannot be performed. The paradox is that Kia has no dualized qualities. There are no attributes by which to invoke it. To give it one quality is merely to deny it another. As an observant dualistic being once said, I am that I am not. Okay, so that's talking about, yeah, you can't. can't invoke the self. Then I think he actually gets into the right, doesn't he get into gets into invoking the higher self later on. I guess he sees that as separate from the I. I feel like the higher self, or the Agiides, holy guardian angel, whatever you want to call it, is really the highest manifestation of the self, of the I, of that which perceives. We are only a facet of that lens. So when we invoke the higher self, that's what we're doing, is invoking the I. We're invoking a higher manifestation of the I. But anyways, we'll get to that with the A when we get to the A, however that's pronounced, the Agiides. Okay, so invocation. And this one, I mean, he had some good stuff here. There are many maps of the mind, most psychocosms, most of which are inconsistent, contradictory, and based on highly fanciful theories. Many use the symbology of God for it. For all mythologies embodied by psychology. A complete mythic pantheon resumes all of man's mental characteristics. Magicians will often use the pagan pantheon of gods as the basis for invoking some particular insight or ability. These myths provide the most explicit and developed formulation of particular ideas extent. Okay, I'm going to stop that right there. Honestly, this first bit, the types of gods he's talking about, 90% of them, it's kind of weird how even in one pantheon you find out one thing's a made-up tulpa and the other thing's an actually self-willed independent being. A lot of these forms, these invoking of the gods, essentially becoming the god. Like he talks about it with the god of war. I forget which god of war he picks. Horus. He talks about this idea of becoming the archetype. This type of thing is the same as a wearable tulpa. I've talked before about wearable tulpas, and that's essentially creating a being that you can then assume as an archetype. So that's what we're talking about here with this first bit of invocation, is assuming archetypes. And if you can assume something's archetype, if you can climb inside of it and wear it like a suit, it's not self-willed independent being. This is actually a good way to figure out which things are. There's a lot of gods, goddesses, etc., that are essentially really old tulpas. And most of those can be possessed. That's what you're doing when you're invoking one of these things, is you're kind of possessing it, but within your body. You are manifesting as that archetype. So once again, you have to understand the archetype as much as possible, because you have to be able to find it to get into it. In the theater of it, yes. That was the part. He talks about ritualistic bodily, yes. How do you tell if it is you possessing it or it is possessing you? Well, if it is possessing you, you're not the one deciding what to do. You're possessing it. You have put them on and are able to use them to work your will. When you are possessed by something, it is working its will through you. Yes, indigenous cultures wearing the mask of the spirit. This is exactly it. But with the masks of the spirit, they're acknowledging that. That's where this became so obvious to me, is because in the traditions that were passed down to me, you put on a mask, you're putting on a character that has energy and power put into it, carried forward. It is Well, it's exactly that. It's a shared tulpa that one can wear. It's a shared wearable tulpa. And when we take on Zeus or Ares or Hermes, we are taking on a role. Now, I know what I just said about if you can wear someone, they're not a self-willed independent being. But there is also the caste of them. There is the archetype which they have created. Because there are exceptions to this rule. One, it is absolutely a fuzzy line. So if you put it on, but you feel strongly inspired to unusual action or have capabilities you usually don't, well, no. But it is a very fuzzy line because there is things the tulpa that you're wearing want to do, especially with putting on some of these things that come with the masks. They have stuff they want to do, but now you're doing it from your perspective. I mean, it kind of is a who's possessing who kind of thing. I mean, the more we try to define it, discuss it, the fuzzier that line is getting, right? You know, like I was saying before, and I'm realizing I have a tendency to just trying to be a noob here and look at these things over again. Like I said last time, I don't really want to think of this as a teacher-student relationship that we have here, but rather we are learning the book together. I mean, that's a good question, and the line just keeps getting fuzzier the more I look at it, honestly. But there is a we can take on archetypes. We can invoke these things into ourselves as a role, as a mask that we put on. Putting on that mask will lead to certain momentum, will lead to certain motivation, will lead to certain desires that are congruent with that role. And there are definitely, I definitely need to take back some of what I said before about where they aren't self-willed independent beings, because I'm immediately coming up with examples that disagree with that. First one being Loki. There is a Loki. Yeah. Most of that particular pantheon, those are real people or beings that took on the archetype in the first place. There is an Odin. He's a being. He was once a man who became so powerful, became so understood and recognized that he became a legend, became a myth, and eventually a god. The same perhaps with Loki, though I don't think his origin is exactly that he used to be a man. But either way, both of these are self-willed independent beings. Both of these are beings that can be invoked, that can be put on as archetypes. Now, there's all kinds of, that's part of the worship of Loki. And yeah, that's part of the worship of Loki within the most traditions is actually becoming Loki. A lot of the people that work with Loki on a very heavy basis will actually start referring to themselves as Loki, will start answering to his name as their own. So he kind of like a multi-conscious being that he can kind of put part of himself in a lot of different people, and essentially gets a lot of people to use him as an avatar. That allows a lot of people to use themselves as his avatar. Pretty good deal on both ends. Anyways, we're still just talking about fully spiritual beings being evocated at this point. Now back to what I was saying about. I mean, that's all he really talks about here is invoking those types of archetypes. Okay, so I want to continue on with that particular topic a little bit deeper than what really he got into. Like I said, we can create our own wearable tulpas that can be just as powerful. A lot of the people I know who have tried to Loki are either transgender, quill, and gain romantic feelings for it. Indeed. Those are the two, that's the other way. That's the other way that's Loki wives, or people that actually essentially take on his role. Those are the two ways I've ever seen anybody work with. There are people that have romantic feelings towards Loki and become married to him. I suppose they're going to be a husband of Loki or a bride, depending on whatever words you like. But oh, I mean, he absolutely is. He changes his sex at one point. Even. I mean, he is very fluid in that way. Absolutely, that's core to the whole mythology of who he is. He changes into a woman a couple times. Yeah, he's gender fluid for sure. I mean, he has a child by a horse. Yes, he gave birth to Slipner. There's a very strong current of that in a lot of the magic in the Norse, and not just with Loki. Odin takes on Sadir or I'm saying the words wrong, but he takes on that trance that is only supposed to be for women. He learns how to do the trance like they do to gain their knowledge. So there's a lot of gender fluidity in the Norse gods in general, not even just Loki. But then there are other gods. Back to the idea of taking on roles, like Zeus. Loki, I heard, lived as some random guy up in the country as a woman. Also. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dionysus was Roman, which, yeah, I mean, in the Roman days, you'd be considered pretty weird as a man if you went by. They think something's wrong with you, like a little bit of ass. Indeed, Dionysus is quite cool. So I wanted to get back to this idea of invocation because there's some things they don't talk about here that I still wanted to talk about. We was talking about a little while ago the idea of offering your sensations as a gift. And yes, this is one of the most powerful things that you can offer a being whose primary existence is on the astral plane. And that is the ability to experience through you. When you offer something like this, cakes or wine, you need to then eat them, saying these are for you and allowing them to appreciate the sensations, to take part in your pleasure by consuming these things. This is something that isn't said outright a lot in the Western types of magic, because Western magic is fake and American, right? Um, yeah, it was mostly a joke for those of us that are in CMG, I suppose. Some of you are what? But anyways, um, outside of your Western traditions, this is a very common idea that one should eat food offerings that are offered to astral beings and allow that pleasure through them. This is extremely common with the religions that have a lot of use of cigars. You know, it's like your Voodoo and that sort of thing. I don't feel like I'm breaking anything by saying a lot of the time that is how you give them their offerings of cigars and stuff like that, is actually by smoking them in that being's honor and allowing them to experience it through you. Later on in that tradition, you know, they get things where they're doing some serious invocations and they dance around, and one of the beings will actually take over someone and begin consuming things. And that's part of the payment. I mean, they like odd things. They like pepper wine, and stuff that humans don't like, very intense sensations. And that's part of how they know that the spirit is taken over, because the spirit can walk over and drink that pepper wine without flinching and just enjoy it. While very few people can walk up to that and just take a drink without having some kind of flinch. Anyways, getting a bit off subject. Well, not really, but verging on talking about those ceremonies that I don't have a lot of experience with. So we're going to leave that off right there. I certainly don't have the right to speak on. So we'll leave that there. But the idea of offering sensations, even simply just offering time within the body, feeling what goes on, is high, can be very high currency for an astral being. Allowing them to be present during sexual activities and sexual interactions is another high end offering that one can give such beings. But also just eating, being, simply breathing. And it can even go all the way up to essentially allowing them to possess you for a moment of time, where they're the one that decides what is going on in exchange for whatever it is that you need them to do. One needs to be very careful if you are going to be participating in that activity. You need to be very clear on who it is coming into your body, how good they are operating in body, what they can and can't do. Have rules that certain activities or actions will cause them to be immediately ejected from your body. There's a lot that needs to go into there, but under the right circumstances, the right trust, this is also a very powerful way to allow them to do a working. If you allow them into your body to do the working from you, from your body. And some of these beings like that are good enough that they can actually just take over your hands. There is a kind that I don't know why I'm being coy. Kind King Tao I have allowed them to possess my hands on a few occasions to help me learn certain aspects of flute play. And he's been inside of me to the point where, like, he's just going off, playing that flute, doing some really cool stuff I still can't do. There are still sounds I've seen him come out, put out of that flute that I cannot do no matter what. And it's a very interesting sensation, allowing someone else to just have control of just your hands. But that is someone who is very skilled on their end at invocation. So that's another thing you have to take into consideration with invocation. is the amount of skill the person taking over your body has at doing that as well. This is a two-person operation. It isn't just you. You're actually allowing someone to be invoked into you. There's their skill level as well. Yeah, there's that. Well, all cool and this up to me trying to asshole that keeps possessing people and making alcohol that keeps making them possessing people and making them phone their exes at 3 in the morning. Indeed. I have a whole song. I have a whole little poem about that, about the devil in the bottle, about alcohol possessing me and making me do some silly stuff. I think I've read that poem for you before, actually. I believe it's in Anarchy's Last Stand. Okay, so invocation. The next one was liberation. Let's see. Invocation, war. Yeah, self-harm that's going on there. I mean, I suppose a god of war might be all right with that, but not a lot of beings are going to want to be invoked just to feel pain. Like, even when I was invoking my higher self in the middle of this and creating the link to my fuller self through the sigil, they kept asking, why does it have to hurt? Okay, I understand what you're doing, but why does it have to hurt? Myself, I kind of like pain, but apparently that's only this facet of me. Okay, so liberation. And I remember correctly, this is just them talking essentially about paradigm shifting or liberating behavior. Is that what increases one's possibilities for future acts? So this is just about kind of breaking the self apart and destroying the sacred, participating in heresy, iconicism, bioaestheticism. So, I mean, in this, we're just talking about the idea of like doing things that create more permanent gnosis. He's basically talking about trying to break down the psychic censor, trying to break down the things that create the narrative in your mind that you currently have. And he has a bunch of different theories on how to do that. Self-destruction, heresy, sacrilege. And there can be some power in that. If there's symbols that you feel afraid of, especially if you've been deeply ingrained into Christianity, burning a few Bibles really does help. I mean, honestly, I did quite a bit of that kind of stuff when I was younger. I got really into the idea of sacrilege for quite a while there, and not just in my own religion, but religions in general, just to break apart the idea. But yeah, it's not something one wants to get obsessed with, right? Like, I can see doing some things a few times that, well, what's the point? Yeah, do it once, burn a Bible, break a cross, whatever you need to do, you know. Especially if you're deeply ingrained into Christianity, if you're deeply ingrained into Hinduism, do something to. I don't know enough about Hinduism to know what sacrilege would be there besides eating a hamburger or something like that, like killing a cow or killing any animal and getting the blood upon it. Anyways, couldn't be any animal. They eat chicken and stuff. Yeah, there is something to be said for that to some extent, but I think he does get into a little bit into it about how there is a diminishing returns on something like that. Because the first time, it's like first time you break a taboo, it's a big deal. But each time after that, it means less and less until it becomes nothing. So it is important to break apart narratives, but at the same time, we don't have to turn ourselves into something dark. We don't have to turn ourselves. We don't have to terrify ourselves. We simply need to, learn to understand that magic is real. We need to learn to understand that we can make ourselves into whatever we want to be. But we don't need to learn to commit atrocities unless we want to be atrocious. And that's kind of what this is all verging on. Like what he's saying here, a lot of this is kind of hinting at the idea of learning to be able to enact atrocities, which unless we intend to be atrocious, this is not necessary. This is not where we should be headed, most of us. I suppose some of us want to be villainous, and there's some fun in the idea of, being a villain, I suppose. But that's only because we've gotten the idea of good and bad all twisted up. Order is good, chaos is bad. And that's the opposite of how things really are. For one's authority is bad, anarchy is good. Freedom is good. Those that wish to control and possess others are the evil. And we live in a society that's can try to convince us that those that want to institute laws and be orderly are the good guys. The ones that are going around bossing other people, telling them what they can and can't do are the good guys. That's one of the lies. That's one of the things that our brain's narrative keeps telling us, because we've been raised in the Western world, that are not correct. It's like I was debating with someone about the whole idea of the modern world, and they were like, well, it couldn't be all bad because that's what got us here. And I'm like, I think you just defeated your own point. Look at where we are. But that's that narrative building in, that idea, that centric idea of the rational mind grasping to everything. I mean, we've lost almost all the magic in the world. We've lost almost all the natural resources in the world. Almost everything's been destroyed and wrecked. But still, the mind tells us, oh, well, it was good to have gotten us this far, to have gotten us this civilized, to have gotten us this far into, because our mind tells us where we are right now is a good thing. But things could have been a lot better if we hadn't just exploited every possible resource and just tried to destroy everything beautiful so that it could be owned. Okay. Aeogeades. The magician's most important invocation is that of his genius demon, true will, or Aeogeades. This operation is traditionally known as attaining the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. It is sometimes known as the magnum opus or great work. And now, I have to take up. I'm remembering why the noob in me rejected so much of this stuff you've read in Chaos Magic, because that's what? It is the personal genius. All right, I like that term, but why would we call this the Holy and Guardian Angel? And The great work is a creation outside of the self. The great work is part of the philosopher's stone. And yes, there is a the holy guardian angel. It is a very Christian imagery. I have to stop coughing. Hold on. Anyways, the great work in alchemy is about transmutation of the self. So in some ways, yes. But we're talking about a more direct method. Exactly, I did the first time too. I believe that was the first time where I put the book down when I first read it. And it gets into all this bit about finding the true will, and you can't have it until you find the true will. Sorry. Just a moment. I really need to stop this coughing. Hopefully, once more the pollen has left the atmosphere around here, my coughing will get better. But I am a heavy smoker, so I cough a lot. Anyways, and that became the great work only after alchemy got stripped away from chemistry and the two things became separate. Before that, the great work was a continuation of learning and knowledge. It was the exploration and learning. It was achieving gnosis, if you will. So it's the opposite of what this is. And holy guardian angel, there are people that say you can be Christian and a witch. Well, you can't be Christian and a coyote. You can't be Christian and a sorcerer, because the two things are in immediately direct opposition of each other. The sorcerer, the coyote, is trying to find this self, trying to find their true will. This is the opposite of being owned. This is the opposite of being property and a creation of a higher being. So these two ideas, though, there being a holy guardian angel, and that also very much makes it outside the self, which is the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. It's like somebody who wrote a book that you're going to accomplish a great objective in 1 year by following the book, but in order to even start the book, you have to do the entire 1 year HGA coffin run. Yeah, we're not going through all of that. The quickest way to talk to yourself is just talk to yourself, right? I know that maybe it didn't make sense, but it's true. Best way to talk to yourself is to simply talk to yourself. I use a mirror. I'm literally talking about self-talk. I talk to myself constantly, but I'm kind of I'm a little multiple, and I kind of have to do that to keep us all on track. But anybody can talk to themselves. It's a natural thing to do. And in order to really get that conversation going, one of the things you can do is literally just go look in the mirror. Look in the mirror, look at yourself, start a conversation, ask yourself something, and then answer. And at first, it may feel like you're just kind of being silly, but the more you do this, especially when you have another face you're looking at, the more you can become objectively talking to yourself and actually having a conversation. And if we do this with the intent of speaking with our higher or fuller self, it will come over time. We will learn how to interact with ourselves. And this is also, I'm constantly touting it, personal sigil. Even if it isn't your ultimate personal sigil, if you make a sigil that is intended to be a symbol of you, of your will, of your I itself, whether it is the final sigil that represents you, it, at the very least, is a sigil made with the intent of creating that connection. So it might just be that one for this one facet of the I. Because that's the one thing that's connected through all of this. That's who we're getting at. The I doesn't really have a will. The I perceives, is that perception. It is, what's the word I'm looking for here? I mean, the I does have a will, but it is outside of the I. The I is the connection, is what connects all of it. The perception, the Kia, as he would call it. But he's not made that connection that the perception is the personal genius, is the higher self, is the fuller self. That this life is simply a facet of that perception. The fuller self, the higher self, is perceiving this reality as it's taking place. Diabolism exists in an overlap. Yeah, fair enough. It can overlap. I mean, this is just my personal understanding. Okay, so let's see what I'm trying to say. There is an overlap between, not an overlap. I've gotten all twisted around in my head. Just a second. There is a I mean, this is just in my opinion, I suppose, but in order to have your full will, in order to be fully connected with the idea that you are a fully independent free will being, in order to work one's own will and understand one's true will, one has to accept that all beings are equal. And we may choose to worship, we may choose to interact with whoever we want on whatever level we want, but that is different than allowing one's, that is different than allowing one to claim ownership of you. That is different than saying, I exist to serve the will of this God, and I am simply a creation of it. And it is the one true God. See, that's where we start coming into problems. Personal sigil of me, of my key. I bet it is pronounced key. That makes more sense. So this would, of your key, essentially, of your I, a sigil of that represents you, because that your will is part of you as well. Yeah, there's your key, your I. I'm realizing, yeah, that makes the most sense. They're probably saying key. That's probably how it's supposed to be pronounced, but it's still just, especially the KIA, it looks like some kind of martial arts term, some energy thing. I don't dig it. I'll just stick with the I. This is the true I, the full I. Spiritual anarchy in essence versus submission. Yes, that's exactly it. And I am a spiritual anarchist. I don't believe that anyone has the right to have spiritual authority over anyone else. And this includes the gods. And you have to be able to accept as the discord, and I can set aside my lack of belief in Christianity while doing magic involving Christian iconography. I just may leave it briefly while I'm doing it and then no more. Yeah, there's plenty of people that, I mean, nothing wrong with working with Christian magic. I don't. I spent some time being Christian and it leaves left a very negative taste in my mouth. I can't work with anything like that. Any work I try to do with angels still to this day, if I'm thinking of them as an angel, it doesn't work out well. Yes, we are. I mean, our souls are part of who we are because we exist in all three realms. The soul to me is the astral part of our being, but the word soul is very nebulous. But we are a collection of energy in motion. We are a collection of thoughts, and we have both a astral, physical, and mental existence. And because the perception, the key or I, is what is the part that is present in all things. It is the glue that stitches the soul into place. Yeah, the ethereal self, that is, well, essentially our aura, because that's what we're talking about with the ether, is that area in between the overlap. So really our ethereal form is another way of seeing our aura, which is the energy created by the interaction between the astral portion of ourselves and our body, is the energy that is created by that connection and by the body itself simply being alive. Yeah, fair enough. Yes, the demons stealing souls. Yes, we essentially are our soul. I mean, someone can't steal your body without kidnapping. So someone could steal your soul in a way, but that would be essentially stealing you. So it's not really, yeah, it's not stealing you at that point, it's kidnapping. There is some interest in the residual energy of the body after death, but it's not usually things that you or I would typically consider demons that are even interested in such things. Okay, so let's see, where are we? I've been here for 2 hours already, and I wasn't even paying attention. So we got the deities, divination, and enchantment. That will be it for this week. This one I'm definitely pronouncing wrong. Io deities. I do like the idea of you speaking of it as the personal genius or daemon. I don't know. because I still don't feel like I have a great word for that polar self. How much do we have to read by next time? Next time we will be reading. Let's see. Let me make sure I have the name of the next Liber in my head. Liber Knox. So from page 57 to 88. Well, we're making pretty short work of the Liber. No. Oh, too far. There's actually I'm using Felix's copy of the Liber Null. Oh yeah, Liber Knox is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk about different types of divination, it looks like. Sorcery. Hey, there we go. See how offended I get by that, eh? Okay. Random belief through dice. Yeah, okay, that's, yeah, I think I remember quite a bit of that one. But anyways. Yeah, indeed. Let's see. Years since I lost my fear over touching Christianity. Yeah, it just left a bad taste in my mouth. It's not really a fear of Christianity, especially not at this point. But okay, let's see. Ritual may be concluded with aspiration to the wisdom of silence by brief concentration on the sigil of the. Yes, it's a waking directly after dawn and doing an invocation every day. That is definitely not my true will to be waking up at dawn. I might stay up till dawn, but waking up at dawn, that is definitely not going to be something that aligns with my true will. Okay, so next we're talking about divination. And what does he have to say about divination? Oh, yes. He believes in the theory that everything that happens creates a point in time that ripples forwards and backwards. And we want to get rid of the mental noise. And he says there shouldn't be too much randomness involved in your divination process. And that divination comes from forging the magic link to the point where the ripple's coming backwards, essentially, from what really happened. What essentially in this argument already happened. Yeah, the Psychonaut, because that's a second book in here. Like we got the Liber Null and the Psychonaut. They're both by Peter Carroll, and they often come together as one book. And that's probably what we'll do. Probably jump right to the Psychonaut after, because definitely when I got it, it was one and then the other in the same book. AOM and then Psychonaut. And I'm going to look over the Psychonaut a little again before I decide what we're doing there, but we'll probably just go ahead and go through both of them. Anyways, yeah, divination. Frankly, he talks about divination as someone that has trouble accepting it, and then like this whole thing he goes about astrology is not real divination. 2000s video game, yeah. Yes, this is the same version with Psychonaut. Let's see, what the heck am I? Yeah, I mean, he just totally trashes astrology for no reason, and I feel like that's again him trying to cling to some sense of the rational mind. He has to have something to step on, one to say, well, this one's no good. Because, I mean, astrology, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, you know, using the planets to say what's going to happen in one person's day that you don't even know, like every Aries is going to meet a redheaded stranger that tells them good news, yeah, okay, that's bogus. But yeah, the astrology has its use and value and can be very much used to divine what is going to happen with society at large and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's a lot of unpredicted variables in there, and you can't use just astrology to predict exact events, really. But it has its purpose, it has its value, it has ancient tradition behind it. I found it rather asinine for him to just dump on it like that. So, like I said, he was just trying to cling to some idea of the rational mind, trying to keep his psychic sensor in place in a way. And then he says that the results shouldn't be too random with whatever method you're using, which is, I again thought funny because astrology fits the bill of what he's talking about best. Yeah, yeah, I didn't remember it being quite this bad, but there is a lot of just smugness and just the feel of like, yeah, um, smugness or a sense of superiority. Indeed, magic books and the idea of empty calories. But I mean, that's what it is. There is a lot of empty calories in here. A lot of, oh well, this is just how I've decided it is. I mean, later on, some of his stuff, some of the maxims that this guy says are important. But it also, looking back, it's so easy to see so many of the blinders that are on his eyes. Low magic versus highfalutin magic. Indeed. I mean, I hate to just sit here trashing the guy when he just died. That's interesting that Gordon White, I'm not quite sure who that is, but I mean, Peter Carroll dies and then Gordon White dies not long after. I wish I knew more about who Gordon White was. Yes, it's very dismissive. It's quite disappointing to look back on and just see that this guy was so fixated on his one perspective. And I do remember being frustrated with the book the first time I read it. I don't think this was the first book I tossed through across the room. I think that was something by Aleister Crowley, because that's another person that when I actually read his stuff, I was like, oh man, what is this? I mean, and I get why when I was a noob, I thought most of the people in the craft didn't know anything. Why I got such an attitude about it all? Because I mean, this is where people get it now. They read this and they're like, well, I can see the flaws in the best writers of the craft. So I must be something special, you know. Anyways, I feel like divination needs to be extremely needs to be random. You need to have a way simply to connect that randomness to the flow of fate around the moment. And it's creating a link to that moment that you're trying to understand. That is the most vital aspect. Not that's another one where he says don't actually pay attention to the results. Use them once the symbols have been obtained. It should be used to help the medical perception crystallize more fully. It should become a basis for lateral thinking or intuitive guesswork, rather than as a final answer to be mechanically interpreted. I mean, there's some truth to that, but the way he puts it, he makes it basically be like, okay, well, just kind of figure it out by logic afterwards. And that's not the way divination works. You have to simply learning to understand what the thing is actually saying. You don't want to do intuitive guesswork. You want to get to a point with the cards or the runes where they are communicating with you directly. And yet what the card says may be different than what it said last week. May be different the card what the card or the rune is saying in every moment. You should be able to read the nuances in its you should be able to read the inflections in his voice, if you will, when you are doing divination. When you are getting familiar with the divination set, you should get a familiarity with it to where you understand that the card is drawing you to this particular portion of it, and that tells you something specific about the card. And yes, maybe it's the three of three of wands, but it has this other special meaning to it today because of this one aspect of the card, or the rune is fallen in just this certain way that tells you more than it should. Yes, that's there. The intuition is more important than the symbol itself. But he's saying it in a way that, like, you should disregard the unlikely. You should work through lateral thinking and rational mind. That's not what we're doing. You should simply be learned to fully understand what it is, the words, the symbols being used as words are saying to you. If that made any sense. Okay. Other than that, omens. I think he talked a little bit about that kind of thing here. We talked about that. The best way to understand omens is to just observe them constantly and begin to learn to understand the synchronicity and flow of patterns that evolve within a moment, the cycles and patterns that repeat. And if we learn to understand these and learn to see how they correlate, then we can use omens for divination. But the only real way to understand that, only real way to do that is through observation and understanding over time through experience. How would I define an omen? Omens can fall into categories. A small omen is just like observing synchronicity. Like, brown, usually when it's, observing moments within the pattern. I'm trying to come up with a way to explain that makes sense. Come up with like an example. Like, small ones. So like on days when I hear a certain bird singing, I have better luck fishing. That isn't a thing here. That was a thing when I was a kid at a pond back home. Now, that kind of omen correlation, there could be more to that than just the supernatural, because but all things are supernatural. Nature, well, there nothing is supernatural. Magic isn't supernatural. Magic is part of nature. But the part of that could be that that bird tended to sing around the same time that the air pressure and the heat was right for the bluegill in that little pond to want to bite. But there was this little bird with sounded like it's saying, "Peace, porridge, peace, porridge." And I took that as a small omen that fishing was good. And even like what part of the pond I would kind of fish at. But then you have larger omens, like the one that Romstead mentioned, the sparrow landing in front of Bernie Sanders. But that was less an omen and more a giving of an opinion. That was more of an endorsement by nature itself. But an omen, like a larger omen, is direct warnings of things. The number 11 can be a warning for me. In the numerology system that I use, 11 means paradigm shift. And if I see an 11 jump out at me, like I could just see an 11, I don't mean anything. When you have one of these kind of omens, it's somebody trying to get your attention. There is a poof that is probably often your own fuller self, your personal genius, your deities, whatever the heck, trying to get your attention. But when I see one of them when 11s pop out, like I just see an 11. I see 11s all the time, no big deal. But when you have an omen, it feels ominous. It feels, well, as true as that is, as funny as that was, that's not what I meant. Yeah, that can be more just the law of aesthetics, putting things together, having the right theater of a moment. The omen, like I said, that 11 popped out at me. Last time an 11 popped out at me, I was actually right after September of 2001. It was like, right after 9/11. And I had actually just flown. And that's a whole other story. I had flown right after 9/11. I get there at the airport terminal, and I see this 11. Boom! Jumps right out at me. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, something's going to happen. And what it was letting me know was that someone was going to hijack a bus that day and get all the buses shut down, and I was going to have to find an alternative because there was a paradigm shift happening to what I thought was going on that time. Omens usually are symbols that pop out and give you warning or just information. Sometimes an omen can be a good thing, but like a lot of times with me, omens are warnings. Like butterflies, watch out for me. And a few times where I was about to do something and a butterfly flew up in my face and stopped me from, trying, like to stop me from doing the thing. I take that as an omen of danger. Anytime a butterfly tries to prevent me from doing a thing, I don't do the thing. So yeah, omens become very. Oh wow, we're almost done here. Well, this has gone pretty well. Hope that made sense about the omens. I think the Queen of Hearts is an egregore. Is an egregore. Oh, absolutely. One could definitely make an egregore. I mean, people think about her all the time. People have an idea of who the Queen of Hearts is, what she looks like, what she does. There is definitely a persona, an archetype, a personality that can be tapped there and used. One could definitely summon the Queen of Hearts. I know this because I have summoned both Gandalf and Bugs Bunny, and it worked. You can interact with these beings. Okay, so when my necklace broke before a date stood me up, that may have been an omen. Yes, there you go. There you go. That's a perfect. That's a good idea of an omen. There's another time I met some people, and just before I got in their house, I stepped in a big old pile of dog shit, and that was an omen for those people and how they turned out to be. I had stepped in a pile of shit coming into their house. But I found that one out pretty quick. Only one of them did I bother with more than that one time of meeting them. And even they wound up pretty shitty in the end. So yeah, there we go. That's it about omens for now, I think. On to enchantment, which is pretty short here. Let's see. I'm just kind of glancing over it real quick. Magic will may exert its effects directly on the universe, or it may use symbols or sigils as intermediaries. The creation of direct effects, like prescience in divination, represents a high point in the art and is just as elusive. Making things happen by either method is referred to as the art of enchanting, or the casting of enchantments. Okay. It is correct that will is not the same thing as willpower, literally obstinance or hardness. This is correct. Will expresses itself best against no resistance when its action passes unnoticed. Only when the mind is in a state of multiple desire do we witness the idiot agonizations of willpower. Well, yeah, it isn't about creating an enchantment. Isn't about having strong willpower. It is about simply believing. You shouldn't have to force yourself. You should simply slide into it. It isn't about force of will. It is about creation of will. It is about correct application of the things, correct application of will. That doesn't sound right. That's not what I mean. It is about correctly insinuating your intention. That's still not the word. That's still not what I'm looking for. No, it isn't certainly the. This isn't monetized. I think I can get away with reading this whole bit here. We're just going to go ahead and read this. Magic will may exert its effects directly on the universe, or may use symbols or sigils as intermediaries. The creation of direct effects. No, I don't want to read the whole thing. Let's get them out of that here. Yeah, I think I read this a couple times and I was like, well, where's the information? Hopefully we're going to get something more interesting. When considering any form of enchantment, remember this: it is infinitely easier to manipulate events while they are still embryonic or at their inception. Thus does the magician turn that aspect of chaos which manifests as causality to his advantage rather than oppose it. The desire then manifests as a convenient but strange coincidence rather than a startling discontinuity. Um, there is that. Like, he doesn't really talk a lot about how to do an enchantment there. He just talks about, oh man. Um, so uh it doesn't talk a lot about their how to do enchantments, just quite a bit about having the true will. And it is important to be clear in your intention and be focused on your intention during the spell. Anything that draws from your intent, any secondary intent, can sap from the power of your spell. In fact, that's where we start getting things like the ego inflation, power sap. I spilled water in the front of a front of an oil diffuser I was using for stress relief. Been in a hard loop for the past 3 weeks. Well, that doesn't sound like it'd be very stress relieving. Uh, um, but yeah, this is where the ego inflation power sap can begin. Is if we are casting a spell not just with the intent of whatever we want to have happen, but if we are casting with the intent to feel like a cool sorcerer, then we start casting that delusion on ourselves. And as much as we do want, I mean, we do want to see ourselves as sorcerers, yeah? But we don't want to be using magic to cause ourselves to see that. And as much as we do want to increase our belief and get ourselves to believe ourselves as that, this casting ourselves to make us see it is problematic. And I'm not saying anyone's doing that on purpose, but if we have that intent in our mind when we cast, if we're thinking or if we cast simply to glorify the ego, that's what it's going to do. Glorify the ego. And that's where we get to the problem with the ego inflation power sap. Is when we have, but it can, I mean, anything that we have a secondary intent to what we are doing that will draw away part of the energy, part of the focus of the spell when we have a secondary intent. So there is truth in what it's saying there about having the full will, making sure that what you want is your will. We don't want to have any second guessing of what it is what we want in that moment of creation. When we reach that level of gnosis where we enact the metaphor that begins the weave, that starts the pattern that will create the new momentum of a reality. But anyways, we don't want to be stuck thinking about other things. We want to be on that intent at the moment we create the spell. As we're casting, we should be fully within that moment. We definitely don't want to have doubts about our intent, regrets, anything like that pulls away from the spell, any secondary motive or intent that we're doing in that moment to pull away from it and can even affect the results. So it is very true that we want to, in that moment, have ourselves aligned, have our intent and our will aligned with our actions as we move through the magic emotions to cast the spell. And he is correct on that. But I mean, we're going to keep reading the book. There is a lot of value in there, but there's a lot of missing pieces, a lot of assumptions in there as well, and it's almost important that there was, because we don't want to get to a point with chaos magic, with any kind of magic or sorcery, where we're going, okay, we're doing it this way because that's what that person says, including me. Yeah, like the way magic works for me is how magic works for me. We each have our own positioning in place within the pattern. It works a little bit different for each one of us. We each resonate differently. You are the center of the universe. You are the center of existence. I am as well. But your universe centered around you is slightly different than mine. Things work a little bit differently there than they do here. So we each have to learn these things for ourselves. That being said, there are lessons to be learned. There are tricks of the trade. There are tools that we can learn to understand. And talking shop with each other helps us with that. So it is important that you understand that ultimately you are the magician. You're also the magician's apprentice. Yeah. As you reach forward, growing in gnosis, becoming a fuller and larger self, reaching towards that full self, a goal that ideally we never fully attain because it keeps growing as well. There is no end point. There is no perfection. The fullest self, the fuller self is not the fullest self, because all of us, each part of us, even that personal genius, even though it exists outside the now, although it exists in that moment we all attain, where all things are one and all things are nothing, or whatever you want to call that. The freaking center of the donut, whatever it is. I don't fully understand what it is, so whatever you want to call it. That is what am I saying? What am I looking for here? That should be growing as well. There is no end point to anything. There is no complete perfection. The fuller self is on its way to becoming the fullest self as we reach towards it. That makes sense. Anyways, we're getting pretty much the end of this episode. That's the reading for this week. Next time will be the let's get that out again. I gotta remember to put a rubber band in my beard next time, so I'm not re-braiding it every few minutes. Okay, so next is Liber Nox. We're talking about sorcery, the double, transmogrification, ecstasy, random belief, the alphabet of desire. That's one of the things that gets talked about a lot. And the millennium. So from page 57 to page 88 is our reading for next week. Anyone have any last minute comments or questions before we finish up the live? I feel like today went pretty well. Okay. Oh, thank you, Max. Thank you for being here. And I am enjoying the book club as well. Um, yes, good. Yeah, I'm enjoying the book club as well. I think we're going to keep this going even after this book because it keeps thinking me. It helps keep me grounded. And honestly, like I had kind of a long day today. Kind of few at least two unexpected large kind of uh-ohs that had me thinking that didn't want to do this, but I'm certainly glad I did because this actually made me feel a lot better. I'm glad we're doing this. Realizing this helps. This is helping keep me grounded. I shouldn't have skipped last Saturday. I was very tired though, but I think the same thing would have happened. I think I would have got on and been like, "Oh yeah, you know, I do this because I enjoy it, and it's useful. You know, this is how we're going back over some things. We're gonna after we finish with the Liber Null and the Psychonaut, we'll decide what to do next. Yeah. Hey Jesse, you actually just caught us at the tail end here. We were talking about the Liber Lux this time. I always get them confused. Yeah, yeah, Liber Lux. Next time will be Liber Nox. I usually go on about 8:30 Pacific time. I don't. I think you're on Pacific time there in Hawaii, if I remember where you are. Anyways, yeah. Like I said, we'll have to decide what we do after this one, but this does keep me grounded, and I don't know if grounded is the word, but either way, you know, it's good to have some structure. It's good to keep me on track. There's actually a link to it in the chat. Oh, I forgot to pin it. I'm supposed to pin that to the top of the chat. There, here at the end. Yeah, if you click that link there, it'll take you to CMU, the public chaos magic group that I run, and it's got a PDF there. But I can just show you that's the most common cover. Yeah, it's very it's a pretty foundational book to a lot of people in chaos magic. Definitely the first one I read. That's why we started there. Since I'm doing this whole returning to chaos magic as a noob thing, felt that was a good place to start. But I would like the next one to be one I haven't read before, so I have a little more of a actual noob experience to it. But anyways, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Yeah. If anybody has anything else to comment, any comments, questions, observations before we call it a night. Yeah, I kind of figured you probably had read it at some point. It is pretty common core. I read it like 15, 14 the first time I read it, something like that. Yeah, I'm aware you're in the group. All right, well, 2 hours and 40 minutes here in just a few seconds. I feel like we covered it pretty thoroughly. It's good to see everybody. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, I think we're going to call it. Like I said, thank you all for being here. It's good to see you. I'm going to be on again on Saturday. Try to quit skipping days. I was just felt exhausted. The Puffin. I think I have read that. I can't remember how to pronounce it right now. But we'll give that. Probably that is a good one to work on. Apophany. I can't remember how to pronounce it. I know I've heard people say it before. I'm pretty sure I've read it, but we will probably pick that one up somewhere in there. But yeah, we're gonna call that for tonight. Bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Town.